Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I am Carlos El Chacon, your host, and I am joined today by Eugene Meininger.
Howdy.
And Mr. Kevin Fiesel.
Hello.
You all enjoyed your 4th of July holiday?
I did. I smoked a duck.
Look at you.
Some barbecue.
Typical.
I don't think you can get high off of a duck, though. I mean, that's not really.
Grouse.
Yep. Also, I don't even want to know what the transcript is going to read for that. But I will tell you, it was delicious barbecue duck,
Nice.
maple and orange glaze. Just really well done.
Man,
That's awesome.
Okay. Note to self. Let's spend the next holiday at Kevin's house.
Yeah. I went to the Pensacola region in Florida and ate tons of seafood and went to the beach for the weekend. And it was a very good time. So I was happy with that.
Okay.
Had some friends that were visiting the one person's parents. And I was like, this is nerdy, but I guess is where we're at. I was hoping to play Pokemon with the one friend. And he's like, well, you could come down. And I'm like, yeah. And then I mentioned it to the wife and she's like, well, you could come down. I'm like, oh, you're serious? Okay. And so visited them for the weekend. It was a great time.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fun. It's always nice to be able to get out.
Yeah.
I guess I did the very, un-American thing of staying home and grilling hot dogs and hamburgers. So,
That's patriotic. Did you have some sparklers? Did you at least scare
Did you blow
some
something
dogs?
up, Carlos?
Yeah. So
that's the American thing.
Yeah, we weren't going to go anywhere. Then my youngest son, Henry, is 7. He decides we can hear him at the house, right? He's like, I want to go see the fireworks. And so we actually drive around, and actually on the road that our office is on, just down the street, there was a family that was lighting up fireworks, and we just parked there and watched them. So watch them spend all their hard-earned money on fireworks. It was quite nice. They kind of alternated between the big boxes that would go up and go boom, and then like the sparklers or sprinklers, whatever you call them. So yeah, always nice to see little fireworks.
I mean, you think about it, the Star Spangled Banner is basically about something just getting blown up. So very American.
There is that.
But still being there the next day.
Still,
yeah.
So that is, so if you ever have a chance to go to Fort McHenry and to see that video, man, they have it's an awesome display. So you watch the video and then, you're in this kind of auditorium and then they open the window and you think it's just going to turn the lights on.
Right.
But then you look at the fort and you can see the flag. Oh man, I started tearing up with my daughter.
That's awesome.
Wrong. And I'm like, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was emotional for me. So okay, so today, episode 249. Inching ever closer. And so we had talked about doing something interesting for episode 250. And then Kevin was like, no, not the one I'm super excited about. 256. 256 is the one.
Yeah, nice round number.
About. And and so I'm like, you know what? You're right. So we'll be interested in doing that. So today we are talking about I guess let me jump into first some SQL Server in the news, which ultimately gets us to our topic today. So they announced in conjunction with Build that as the new version of SQL Server, so SQL Server 2022, they're going to tie SQL Server Management Studio versions to that. So the new version 19, the SQL Server Management Studio, is built for 2022 and has some built-in pieces in terms of being able to handle the new features. There is also an update to Azure Data Studio, and this is what caught my attention was the new feature of data marts. So data marts in Power BI.
Right.
And I thought, well, I know a guy who could talk a little bit about this. And so that's what we wanted to do today. So as always, right, our show notes are going to be at SQLDataPartners.com/Power BI Data Marts or at SQLDataPartners.com/249. And I don't have any shout outs today. I do apologize. However, I will give a shout out as we've started to put out some YouTube videos. They're very basic. They're starting with backups. And I'm reminded of a Brent Ozar post that he had at one time. And I don't remember exactly what he was talking about, but he was like, yeah, there are lots of these things, but this one is mine, right? And that's kind of how I feel about this video, right? These videos are mine. So if you wouldn't mind taking a peek, SQL Data Partners on YouTube, while you can find our podcast, you can also start to see some of these videos we put together, and we'd appreciate you taking a peek, letting us know what you think. Okay, so with that, jumping in, let's start talking about Power BI or data marts, excuse me, in Power BI. Now, as always, right, the marketing machine at Microsoft is saying,
Right.
Self-service BI has finally arrived, right? You can now take separate sources of data. Don't worry about your IT, group. Now departments, in fairness, they are talking about departments. Departments can bring together different data sources, pull them together into a data mart in Power BI and present them. And you kind of get out of IT's hair.
Right.
So to help separate.
That's a polite way of putting it, right? As opposed to circumventing IT. It's just we're getting out of their way. We're not being an inconvenience. Yeah.
Yes. So now that was actually one of the quotes I wanted to ask you about, because I guess we're going about this slightly, maybe backwards, but
Sure.
one of from the rollout announcement, the line is, best of all, IT doesn't have to worry about getting all data into centrally governed data sources, thus providing discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what discipline exactly are we showing here? I was like, well, it still feels like.
Shoot, I was hoping to be the guy who'd be down on it today.
I mean, I like a lot of the things that they're doing. I mean, to me, well, it's a bit of a mantra, right? That they've used in a bunch of places. But to me, what that means is they're mimicking the original idea with data marts, where trying to have a single enterprise data warehouse that has everything turns out to be a heavy lift and take years and millions of dollars or what have you, right? As opposed to, okay, maybe we can have these more bespoke one-off data marts that are more focused on a specific need or a specific area and are easier to set up and manage, right? Like Kevin's going to know all of this theory way better than I have, because I've read like an eighth of a data warehousing book. But my understanding is the whole Kimball versus Inman kind of idea of like, okay, do you have one big solution or do you have a bunch of these small ones? And I think what they're trying to say is
one warehouse to rule them all, and in the darkness find them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like you don't have to do that. You don't have to have a single data warehouse for everything, for every need, for every solution, right? That's the charitable read, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that it's like, oh, hey, by giving this to more users, right? Again, you're kind of getting out of IT. I just thought it was somewhat ironic that they're saying, oh, right, thus providing discipline at the core. I'm like, no, you're giving users a way to circumvent or kind of use their own data.
They're just providing the flexibility at the edge, right?
That's right.
They're assuming you already had discipline and you already had it at your core, right? You're already doing crunches and everything.
Sure.
And now they're just providing, like, they're doing the yoga stretches. But yeah, I agree.
So this will work really well for Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Now,
no, I do completely agree with that concept. I think I think the discipline to the core is going to be assumed in here, because this is all about the edge. This is all about, oh, well, you don't have to work with IT. Well, hopefully there's nothing in that data that's really sensitive, that needs to be really secured. And hopefully all of your calculations and measures are going to match what the calculations and measures of other units are, in case you ever have to share these reports outside of your department. which are kind of some of the reasons
Right.
why enterprise data warehousing is where it is. As a concept, no, I think Power BI driven data marts is a smart idea for specific circumstances, especially in smaller cases. But I'm not sure that it's going to provide, in the end, a real benefit. I think it's going to provide a lot of noise to organizations because you'll be back to infighting about what exactly does revenue mean.
Right. I've seen some discussion on Twitter where some people are frustrated about the use of the term data mart because it has decades of baggage and for IT professionals means something very, very specific. And two, a lot of trying to set it to be the default. So I don't know if it's changed, but some of the initial dialogues are like, you're trying to make a data flow. And it's like, do you want to make a data mart instead? To me, the way that I always think about this and the way I talk about like when I give a presentation is, when you're building a submarine or you're building a helicopter, those have very, very different sets of constraints, right? And there's been times like in the movies, with a movie that I should remember, but it's about this AI kid, where you have a helicopter that can turn into a submarine. And it turns out that's a terrible idea because submarines need to be able to withstand large amounts of pressure, need to be waterproof, need to be very heavy and solid. Helicopters need to be light, need to be able to withstand high winds. They don't need to deal with a lot of pressure. And that's how I think about a lot with IT-driven data solutions and business-driven data solutions, right? Is that you have different constraints. And it tends to be with business-driven data solutions that you're able to take advantage of a closeness to the business and understanding the process, but the tools need to be intuitive and easy to use. And we can make jokes about DAX and we can make jokes about trying to write M code. But in general, I feel like the whole ethos of Power BI has been, let's take these Excel add-ins, put them into a product, and make something that can be driven entirely by the business. And so this is not a surprise. Like the moment they mentioned data flows, I think everybody knew they're trying to reinvent the wheel, which is the data warehouse, but they're trying to do it from the side of the business user, right? And I think they're succeeding, but I also think that Kevin is right, that like it's like if you were like regressed in age to a kid and you had to go through puberty all over again, right? Like there's parts that we'd like to forget about that time. And I think we're going to run into the same problems that we ran into 30 years ago and we solved, but we're having to solve them again because we're trying to make it from a tool set that is approachable and accessible for business users. I think that's what's going on, and it's going to cause a lot of growing pains as we work through that.
Sure.
Yeah, well, this ultimately reminds me of a Dilbert strip from like 30 years ago. Speaking of 30 years ago,
right?
Where you have the centralized organization chart is like, we need to decentralize this, and then the next screen is the decentralized org chart. Is like, oh, we're having too much chaos. We need to centralize this,
right?
And that this is the solution. That our problems are that we have the central data warehouse that's failing, so let's decentralize it. And then we have our problem is this decentralized mess of everybody's arguing about, there's no conformity in terms of dimensions, in terms of measures. Let's centralize it and put it all in one place. And we're just going in circles. How many times have we been through this before, officer?
Yeah. The thing that I'm excited about sincerely is that, like, working with Carlos, we've had a number of customers where we knew right out of the gate, okay, we're going to be dealing with a certain amount of complexity, right? So I'll give you an example. We've done work making reusable reports for printing software for print shops. And we knew from the start that we kind of wanted the whole business to fit in there, right? We didn't want just a single department with a couple tables. We wanted finance, we wanted operations, we wanted HR. And so the idea of getting something where we can grow that out to something that is quasi-centralized, that is approved, that has like row level security built in, that you can apply SQL queries to, like a lot of that gets exciting for me, is the idea of, okay, we know from the start that we want like X level of complexity, and we have tooling that can support it, instead of what we have today, which is we make one big complicated Power BI report. We don't put any visuals on it, and then we upload it and make a bunch of other reports that point to that data set. Or we try to carve it out into a bunch of data flows, and depending on how reusable those data flows are, we may not have solved the problem, right?
Sure.
So
and you'll,
I like it for this. Go ahead.
So I unfortunately, right, well, I guess just to state, and I'm going to give my take on what it is. Let's just define it, because I think we've talked kind of about some of the problems, but let's maybe define what it is, and then we can, for the audience who haven't dived into it, and then some of this might make more sense. So, and correct me where I'm wrong, but Eugene, as I understand it, this is ultimately I feel like it's a combination of two things, right? For my knuckle dragging Neanderthal, is that, so if you've used like Zapier or Cozy Rock, it's like an extension of, I now have the ability in Power BI to connect to multiple data sources. So that connecting logic is in there a bit. I can bring in that information and I ultimately store it in an Azure SQL database that a Power BI premium subscription, which I don't think we mentioned yet, Power BI premium feature, that it spins up for me, and it's going to keep my data there. That's kind of the nutshell of what I feel like the Power BI Data Mart is there's the front end piece. I can suck in the data. I have the, and there's a GUI, and there, I can, and they've even integrated. I thought this was funny. Your 7 years of SQL, right? Yeah. Now, so Power BI in theory now supports SQL queries. Import that data into an Azure SQL database, and there it will keep it, and you can create reports from there. That's my take of what the Power BI Data Mart kind of service or feature is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that in a lot of ways, but like the thing for me is very little of this is new, right? It's just the recentering of where this stuff lives and what it means to be the thing X. A lot of the technology, a lot of the process
who can do it, new. Right? Again, right? It's, to a degree, the idea that again, the whole self-service thing. Hey, users,
but you could already do this with duct tape and paper clips, right? Like the SQL part is new, but before you could already combine data from different sources with Power Query, add the logic with DAX, and publish it as a data set, and then build reports off of that, right? Sure. What has changed is two big things. The little bit with the back end and the front end, but the technology, a lot of it's the same. What has changed is this is no longer a report-driven process. This is a data-driven process, right? And we had some of that happen with data flows. Before, I mean, with many projects you and I have done with people, it was we built a report, and then that produced the data set, and then we could point other reports to it, to the point that sometimes we would build, like I described, a sham report that had no visuals whatsoever. It was just the data set.
Right.
Now we don't have to have the sham. Now we can have, we're starting with the data set first, and it's all in a web interface. We're not doing this in Power BI desktop at all, right? So that's new. That's a recentering of technology we already had. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, what's also new is now there's an actual SQL database that you can connect to with SSMS or Azure Data Studio. Now, I don't know how they're dealing with data types, right? Because looking at the docs, it looks like there's very specific data types for columns. And I can tell you with Power Query, you don't get that level of specificity, right? You do not get nvarchar 20. You get text. you don't get, numeric 18,3. You get number, which is just a double, right? Mm-hmm. So there's clearly some metadata inference that's going on there, but that's what's changed. It's an orientation change plus some fancy front end stuff with the SQL stuff. But you could do a lot of this before, not the SQL piece, but the connecting different data sources, having a single data model, you could do all that before. They've just made a UI that's more intuitive for some of that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess if I were to summarize it up, I think the best case scenario is in your classic enterprise data warehousing solution, which I think that's where you should try to get to. But that's a
Right.
you must be this tall to ride the ride type of problem.
Sure.
And data marts are trying to make it so that, you know what, you're not that tall. Maybe you're down here. We'll give you something that is sort of like mom saying, we have data mart at home.
Right.
And data mart at home is Power BI data marts. We have data warehouse at home.
Yeah.
So for small organizations, for companies where you don't have to worry about, say, different departments defining, where a lot of the benefits of conformed dimensions and conformed measures don't matter nearly as much because you only have 8 people who ever work with the reports, and they're all in alignment mentally in terms of what a thing means. In those cases, I think life gets easier, and to the point where, data marts may make sense, that you're not building out all of the underlying infrastructure necessary to get that enterprise data warehouse solution, and then to deploy out department specific marts and to drive off of those or drive off of that warehouse.
I think it also works well for situations where you really aren't doing a lot of data warehouse shape transformation, right? Because we've run into situations where it's basically, we just want the application database in Power BI, but we're going to get rid of all the GUIDs and things that bloat it, right? We'll maybe do a little bit of conforming of some of the dimensions, but for situations where it's a very clean replica of the application database, like that print management software I talked about, that also can be kind of useful, where you're doing a little bit of massaging, but it's not everything's star schema now,
Sure.
But yeah, I agree. I think the whole thing with Microsoft is they're trying to uplift where the business user is at. And yeah, they're probably not going to get them tall enough to ride the ride to make a true enterprise data warehouse. But at least we're getting to the point where we can have a centralized data set that's less likely that someone's going to accidentally delete it, and that the people who know how to speak SQL can actually query against it, right? So I think there's some advantages, but yeah, I agree with Kevin that like in a lot of ways this is a stopgap, and it's going to cause a lot of confusion because you're trying to get people to reinvent the wheel without telling them about the 17 failures, or you're trying to get people to reinvent the light bulb, and you're giving them no guidance on the 1,000 failures that happened before that, right? You're just like, well, here's how to make a light bulb. Good luck.
Sure.
So,
yeah, so it will be interesting. I know that peeking at the guy, guy in Cube, their video, right? There lots of conversation about it. They hit it much more. They hit it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's not like they are still kind of making some tweaks. So it will be interesting to see what happens here. But again, right, to your point, right, maybe some tweener applications might be able to get the benefit. But I guess I having said that, it wasn't obvious to me, but because we're talking about Power BI Premium, it sounded like that wasn't the subscription model, and maybe I'm wrong there.
So it's supported by Premium and Premium per user, from what I understand.
It is Premium per user as well. Okay,
at least according to the guy in the Cube video, right?
Okay, very good.
Yep. So just $20 per user per month.
Yeah, that seems like that would be a key piece, right? Because if you're missing that, right, and you have to go to the premium level, and all of a sudden it does feel like
they've been pretty good about having feature parity with Premium per user. So yeah, I don't see that being a big issue.
Very good. Okay, well, we need to kind of wrap up here today. We're running a little tighter than normal. Last thoughts or other?
I'm glad to see them moving in this direction, because I think the constant thing with Power BI has been governance and balancing IT and admin, and I think they're getting better and better about having a gradient or a spectrum of solutions, right?
Sure.
They're adding features like certified data sets, endorsed data sets. They're learning that, we can't just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And so long term, I'm optimistic. Short term, I'm pessimistic. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion.
Kevin?
Yeah. I'll try to be less. I'll try to be more pessimistic than Eugene.
Okay.
I'm not sure this has a great fit. I think the time could have been better spent making data flows better.
Okay, that's fair.
Really introducing something that is unique and interesting and important versus attempting to make, we have data warehouse at home.
Yeah. We've given you hammers and we're like, well, here, we're going to make better nails. And it's like, well, could you give people other or better tools? Yeah. That makes sense.
Well, I don't know. I guess that the short-term piece, I don't know right now that you can connect SQL to it.
You can connect SQL to it, but it's not SQL, right? Because you're just reading against it, right?
That's fair.
So,
that's fair.
So now you have something where it's like you've made this data model from business users or people who are Power BI experts. And now people who are SQL experts can run request queries against it, read queries, but they can't change anything. So there's a weird inversion of power compared to what we're used to. Right now, the DBA has to ask for permission from the Power BI.
How do I get access to that data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
See how that plays out. Okay. Well, very good. Awesome. Well, thank you, compañeros, for tuning in to today's session. We do appreciate it. If folks are interested in reaching out, how can they do so, Eugene?
You can find me on Twitter at SQLgene.
Mr. Kevin?
Mom says we have social media at home.
And compañeros, you can reach me. I am at Carlos El Chacon on LinkedIn. Please let me know that you've listened to the podcast, and that will make sure to get a prompt or faster response. Thanks again. If you do have some time, and the next time you find yourself on a computer, if you're walking your dog now at the moment, check out those YouTube videos, SQL Data Partners. We would appreciate it. And we'll see you on the SQL Trail. Bye now.
Bye.
SQL Data Partners.